Hello, welcome back to the studio. In my last video, I introduced my custom palette building series. In this series, you'll be joining me as I fill up this palette with 15 watercolor pans. And I'll be guiding you through creating your own custom watercolor palette that's perfect for you. In my last video, I focused on choosing your own palette box for building your custom palette in. I'll leave the link to that video up above, and down below I've got a link to my blog where I've discussed some of the advantages of choosing a more limited palette and some more options for building your own palette box. In this video, I'm going to discuss swatching and testing your watercolors. Whether you are replacing a student set, or you are adding to your existing collection, or you're just trying to select a limited palette from the colors that you have, a great first step is to test the watercolors that you already have. If you don't have any watercolors yet, or if this is your first time trying professional watercolor paints, I would recommend that you get a dot card. Many brands offer dot cards of their range so that you can try a number of different colors and learn which colors really appeal to you and which paint properties you're looking for. Initially, I planned to swatch my own watercolor collection for this video. However, I wanted to give you a more balanced view where I react to some paints that maybe I'm unfamiliar with or even that I don't really like. So I got a really unique opportunity. Another artist, Shada from Sadie Saves the Day, sent me a dot card sheet of her watercolor collection. So you'll be able to see my reaction to a number of different paints from a number of different brands. These are great paints that Shada really loves for the most part, but that my reaction may be somewhat different. So this will help you see how your collection can be very personalized and can be different from other artists. I also wanted to point out, Shada also sent this really beautiful little postcard. Isn't that gorgeous? A little marsh fertility. So that's what she paints with her watercolors. So now we'll see what my reaction is to these same paints. If you're new here, my name is Lee Angold. I'm a botanical and natural science illustrator, and on this channel I share watercolor techniques and tips and some insight into my daily life as an illustrator. If this is content you're interested in, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Jumping right in, I'm swatching some colors from Winsor Newton. These first two, the quinacridone violet and perylene green, are very deep, dark valued, transparent colors. They really appeal to me. I love working with these colors, so that's the sort of colors that I like to include in my palettes. Opera Rose, on the other hand, is extremely bright. It's very pinky magenta, but it's not very light fast. Indian Throne Blue is back to another very transparent, deep, dark valued color, which again I really love. Winsor Red is a bright fire truck red, but it's not very transparent, so I don't like it as much. While testing these colors, I'm primarily focusing on my first impressions and whether I really enjoy these colors rather than where they fit in a color wheel, because I think that I'm going to be much more effective if I really love all my colors. So for example, coming up, there's quite a number of yellows, which Shada really likes because she really loves working with yellows. However, I'm very fussy about my yellows. I don't like any kind of opacity in my yellows. I prefer them to be completely transparent. You can see in both the swatch card sheet and as I'm swatching that many of these yellows have a sort of milky finish to them, which is very common in yellows. If you love yellows and that doesn't bother you, there's nothing wrong with that. But I really prefer a completely transparent yellow, like this PY150 that I'm swatching now. Next, I'm also comparing different brands. So whereas Winsor Newton dried pretty hard, Sennelier dries softer, and Daler-Rowney, these paints that I'm swatching now, don't seem to have quite as much color payoff as the other two brands that I've swatched so far, or the other three brands that I've swatched so far. However, I do like this nice golden, juicy yellow color of the Daler-Rowney Indian Yellow. That's a nice bright color. It's happy. And then I've been very impressed here with this Magello Indanthrone Blue. You can compare it to the Winsor Newton version up above and how much more vibrant it is. So this is why it pays off sometimes to compare brands. Sometimes the colors are very similar, but their color payoff or paint behavior will be a bit different. So these Magello colors, I haven't really used this brand before, and I've been very impressed with how bright they are. Like that PR 122 that I just swatched, that nice bright magenta. Next, we're looking at another blue. This probably has a white mixed into it. And another one of those slightly milky yellows. Now we're gonna swatch M. Graham. Now I have some M. Graham paints. They're honey based and they stay very sticky. Depending on your climate, that may be a great thing or not such a great thing. Our indoor environments here in Canada tend to be quite dry. So having a easily rewettable paint like M. Graham has been great for me. But since I'm taking this travel palette to Australia, crossing several climate zones, I might avoid honey-based, very sticky paints because I don't know how they'll set in a tropical climate or even in southern Australia where they don't have the same sort of dry out heating that we have in Canada. So continuing on with these M. Graham colors, you can see how powerful they are. This is a very powerful orange, for example, and this is a yellow ochre, phthalo blue. So if you like really bright, saturated, punch you in the face colors, these are them. And then this really surprised me. I don't always include an ultramarine in my palettes, partially because they tend to be a little bit tough to get a good color payoff out of. But this M. Graham ultramarine was super saturated, so if I ever wanted an ultramarine, that's something that I would go for. Then continuing on, this is PG36 Phthalo Green Yellow shade. It's a useful mixing color, but maybe not something that appeals to me on its own, so I would only include it as a mixing color. So that's something to keep in mind, like are you going to use these colors alone or are you just using them for mixing? Next we're trying Old Holland, and once again this is another brand where the color payoff just doesn't seem to compare very favorably to the M. Graham up above, especially with this ultramarine. I'd heard good things about this ultramarine deep, but it just would not re-wet. It was so weak. Likewise, the burnt sienna just was extremely weak. The Heiveninga yellow light was really beautiful, though. It was quite transparent, which is, again, uncommon in yellows. Most yellows have quite a bit of milkiness to them, so I did enjoy that yellow. Now pre-wetting these Old Holland colors, trying to get a little bit more payoff out of them, but once again you can see this red ochre, it's just a little bit weaker. So if you like really, really subtle colors, this might be something that you love, but I prefer very strong colors, and I haven't been enjoying how much I have to scrub at these colors to get any color out of them. Now we're going into the Daniel Smith colors, and so here we have quinacridone burnt orange and quinacridone gold, which are two of my favorite transparent earth tone type colors. They're really gorgeous. And then lunar black, which I don't usually include black pigments in my colors, but this is a very cool effects paint. It has some really strong granulation. Cascade green is another effects paint. You probably don't want a palette made up entirely of effects paints, but if you have a few colors that have strong granulation or strong personality that you really love, that can really bring a personal touch to your palette. Next, I'm getting into the Schmincke colors. This is a brand that I've really developed a huge appreciation for because their paint consistency is wonderful. You won't get any binder separation. They always set nicely in pans. Getting back to their red opalite, they had a special edition trio of natural earth paints that are all very weak. So unfortunately the red opalite doesn't have quite the same payoff as the other Schmincke colors. You'll see there's the other two coming up on this page as well. But if you compare the rest of the Schmincke colors, you can see how they all just re-wet very nicely. They're all set up very nicely on the dot card as well. So that's something that I'll be looking towards for this palette, again, because I'm traveling and I want very consistent paint behavior. I don't want any surprises. So here we've got some nice quinacridones and perylines coming up again. I really like these sort of muted earthy reds. Purple magenta, PR122 is another one of my favorite pigments, although I did like the Magello version before as well. That ultramarine, the ultramarine finest from Schmincke that I just finished up, is one of my favorite versions of ultramarine, but again, I'm not crazy about ultramarine as a color and I don't find a huge amount of use for it for my personal practice. So don't include colors just because they're common. If you don't really need a color, then you don't really need a color. Now I'm testing out Core. These are re-wetting very nicely. They're very strong colors. Here's what they call quinacridone deep gold, but it's another version of the quinacridone burnt orange that you saw from Daniel Smith. And again, a great variety of different bright, vibrant colors. Once again, while swatching these colors, I'm focusing just on my first impressions and whether I like these colors on their own and how they compare between brands and between pigments, rather than trying to build a set that makes sense. So if I like a lot of greens, that's great. If I like a lot of reds, that's great. I may not include all of that in a finished set, but it's really important to know, what paint properties do I like? Transparency, do I like high color payoff? What appeals to me in these paints? So here, for example, we have a very transparent nickel azo yellow. It's very strong. That's a yellow that really appeals to me. So I'll find a way to include that. On the other hand, here's an ultramarine. It's a perfectly fine color. It's wonderful, but it's not necessarily my thing. So just be honest with yourself and make sure that you really try to include colors that you love. So while swatching out these colors, I definitely found a few favorites and colors that I would love to work into either this palette or future palettes. And so I think it's really important to always include colors that you love. So if there's any unique colors that you really love, let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to try them out as well. Don't forget to hit like if you enjoyed this video. It really helps the channel. And also hit subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when the next episode in this series comes up. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.